the Ariza Inspire Podcast, where mental health meets real life. I'm your host, Samantha Ariza, therapist, educator, semi-normal human being, depending on who you ask, but overall, your go-to for relatable, real conversations about this mysterious topic of mental health. Around here, I believe that mental health doesn't have to be stiff or scary. It doesn't have to be, super structured, but we want to keep it human here, practical, and have a little bit of fun along the way because life is messy and stressful enough. And we're all just trying to figure it out. Each week, you'll get honest insights, science backed tools, and of course, stories that remind you that you're not alone. So, whether you're on your own healing journey or supporting someone else, there's something here for you. So, grab a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, get cuddled up with your favorite blanket, and let's get started. Now, have you ever wanted to cry? Like, you knew it would help. You're sitting there and you're just like, please come, please, tears just happen right now. And nothing happens. Your chest feels full, your throat is tight, your eyes are burning, and you know that it has to happen, but it still doesn't. Maybe it's not that though. Maybe it's like you don't even feel anything at all and you just feel flat. Like your emotions are behind some glass or they're just out of your reach. You know what that is when you feel like you should be feeling something and then, still can't get there. I want to say this though for you. Not being able to cry is not because you are broken. It's often a sign that your brain and your body have shifted into a different state, a more protective one. And what many people call shutdown or emotional blunting, that is what we're going to talk about today. So, we're going to unpack the science of what might be happening when you just can't cry like other people are crying, and what could help you gently come back to reality. Here are the different sections and different things we're going to discuss today. 1, that crying is a nervous system behavior. 2, that shutdown and emotional blunting mean something specific. 3, why the nervous system blocks tears. 4, how emotional numbing can be a result of trauma. Number 5, alexithymia, the no words for feelings and how that blocks your crying. 6, the side effects of medication. 7, the big one, dissociation, and how that is different than shutdown and emotional blunting. And lastly, which is my favorite part, the practical tools to help you when dealing with this topic. So, crying isn't simply sadness leaking out of your body. It's a whole body response that involves emotional arousal, that body activation in your breath, that throat, those facial muscles, your autonomic nervous system shifting, and the brain's appraisal of safety, which is the big one. Because for many people, crying happens when the body senses I'm safe enough to release. So when someone can't cry, we shouldn't ask if they're feeling enough or what do they actually feel. We should ask them, what state is your nervous system in right now? So what does shutdown and emotional blunting actually mean? Emotional blunting generally refers to a reduced intensity of emotions. Like it says, your emotions feel blunt. They just kind of stop. They hit a wall. Overall, this can be both positive and negative. So when people describe feeling dulled, flat, or disconnected, it can show up as maybe depression or trauma-related disorders. But it's not just that. It's not just I can't feel sadness. I can't feel happiness either. Now, shutdown, sometimes called hypoarousal or that freeze collapse response, is a state where the nervous system conserves energy when it perceives threat as overwhelming or inescapable. Often, this is accompanied by numbness, disconnection, low energy, and difficulty assessing their emotions. And again, this is something we see a lot in trauma, this idea of numbness and blunted affect. These are recognized as common responses after a distressing experience. And we'll get into that a little bit more of why that happens. So, sometimes this inability to cry isn't the absence of emotion. It's emotions that have been gated by the new nervous system. And why does this nervous system block that? It's because of protection. One of the hardest things that people struggle with accepting when you can't feel the emotions is that your body is shutting down to protect you. It's not because you're too weak. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because your body knows that this is going to overwhelm you. We've talked about just recently this idea of how trauma plays a part in emotional blunting and shutting down. And that's because your system doesn't want you to be overwhelmed. It shuts down to survive. Because in high stress situations, your brain prioritizes functioning, coping, getting through, not falling apart, because your brain is wired to survive. And I think about this specifically when it comes to grief. When my father-in-law passed away, my top priority was my kids, my husband, helping him through his feelings, helping him through the process of burying his father, thinking about my kids and how they were going to react because this was their first experience with you know, death. And I did not cry or feel anything for a good week. And I remember specifically the time where I kind of allowed myself to feel. And it was like a week after the event. I think I went into my I had it like my own office space slash like closet slash like workout room kind of thing. And I went there and I like lied down on my yoga mat and I let it go. But it was a week after. I think the kids were at school. My husband was finally at work and my brain finally felt safe to let those emotions out. And so that is what we have to think about when it comes to the idea of your brain shutting down or your brain prioritizing, survival is that when it is time, you are going to feel those feelings. But the other aspect of this is if you grew up with certain messages, this might not feel comfortable. The idea of don't cry or crying makes it worse or no one's going to help you or this big one, which I think I've heard a million times, especially from clients or even myself, that your feelings are too much. When you hear those kind of warning signals, the moment your body feels like you're going to cry, it's going to shut down instead because your nervous system has learned that tears are unsafe. Crying is unsafe. This emotional overwhelm is unsafe. And over time, your body becomes very good at preventing it. It's a skill that it develops unintentionally. And this can happen not only in day-to-day events, but it can happen as a response to trauma. In PTSD research, emotional numbing has been described as involving things like detachment from others, loss of interest, reduced emotional responsiveness. And I think one of the best ways to describe this and give you kind of like a visual picture is to think of Max from Stranger Things. And whether or not we're not going to get into a discussion of season 5, but going back to season 4, which was a great season, we see Max respond in this kind of emotional blunting shutdown stage after the loss of her brother, Billy. She detaches from her friends. I think Lucas mentions, like, you're a ghost. She does not respond to them and she's kind of living in her own world. And that's a response to trauma. And it's important to kind of note that this numbness isn't always depression, which kind of plays a part in like the nuance of diagnosis. Like, yes, emotional bluntness can be categorized into depression. However, if there is a significant event that happens that has caused this feeling, then we're going to look at that instead. We're going to look as it being trauma related because this is a trauma adaptive response. If feeling fully would overwhelm that person's system, the system reduces that feeling just so that they can survive. It's not a forever thing. It's not always going to happen, but it's long enough to help them get through. Which leads us to the idea of another pathway that can affect crying is alexithymia. This is a trait characterized by difficulty identifying and describing feelings, which when we talked about emotions in episode 302, we could understand that identifying emotions is super important because when we can describe those feelings, when we can understand it, it helps our bodies regulate. So if your inner experience is hard to label or make sense of these emotions, it can stay kind of undigested. Not because you don't have them, but because you don't know how to consciously express them. And just like we said in episode 302, the research suggests that emotional awareness and related skills can improve targeted work in these contexts. Meaning, if you improve your emotional vocabulary, you're not going to suffer with alexithymia. So again, if you're feeling disconnected from feelings for a long time, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. Maybe you just gotta increase your emotional vocabulary. However, it doesn't necessarily mean it can be trauma related or something like that. It could be medication related. And again, this is not something we're bringing stigma to because sometimes you need an assistance when it comes to your emotions and what you're dealing with. However, when we talk about medication, it's very important for us to understand what's happening. Different types of medications, anxiety medications, depression medications, helps bring kind of the highs and lows down to a tolerable level. Instead of feeling them all the way up here and all the way down here, a lot of times it brings the wave into perspective, just so you can handle it in order to gain skills to do more stuff. But that means that sometimes in some people, it can actually make them feel nothing at all and kind of get to this emotional blunting part. A large survey study reported emotional blunting in a substantial portion of those who are being treated for depression using like SSRIs or SNRIs. There's also growing research, though, that SSRIs can reduce emotional responsivenesses from some, including effects on reward of learning and sensitivity. But again, most of the time when we're talking about this, it's because the purpose of it is to bring down the intensity. It just needs some regulation, it seems. Because emotional blunting can be a residual symptom of depression or a medication effect, sometimes both. So you need to really pay attention to what's going on there and figuring out what is the real culprit. And if, again, you suspect medication blunting, the answer is not stopping abruptly. Don't do that. When people feel side effects, they're like, I gotta stop. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. I gotta stop. No, please don't. Talk to your psychiatrist, talk to your prescriber, and really find out how you can regulate this. Because some medications, if you go off them, are going to hit you like a ton of bricks, and that's not what we want for you. Let's take a break from the episode to talk more about our emotions. I know. You're probably getting tired of talking about your emotions since season 3 is all about emotions. But I know you're probably wondering, Sam, how do I apply this to my life? But don't worry, because even though we're going into all of this kind of technical, kind of scientific, kind of like physiological stuff, I have some more tools to help you. I'm coming out with a course called Understanding Emotions 101. And in this course, we're going to break it down in a more simplistic, more adaptable, and more applicable way for you. It's going to be a way for us to take all of this knowledge and understanding of emotions and really bring it to the day-to-day life. We're going to learn that emotions are adaptive. We're going to learn how our emotions work in our own bodies and what we can do to better understand, better cope, and kind of even reframe what's going on with us. Because our emotions are something we're going to deal with for the rest of our lives, let's be honest. So let's become friendlier with them. Understanding Emotions 101 is going to come out sometime in March. But if you want, get on the waiting list, get on that pre-order list. You can use the QR code that we have here. You can use the link in our bio, and you can sign up to know exactly when Understanding Emotions 101 drops. But let's get back to the episode now. Now we've talked about emotional blunting and shutdown, and I want to now turn into the idea of dissociation, because this is one of those words now that is becoming very well known. I feel like a lot of people are talking about they dissociate all the time and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I dissociated for a second or I blacked out for a second. And this is one of those kind of terms that is becoming more of an adjective than an initial diagnosis anymore. So let's really kind of dive into it, because this is the one piece that often gets lumped in with emotional blunting. And it's important to make that distinction, because dissociation isn't just feeling numb or flat. It is a shift in consciousness, a way that the brain creates the distance from overwhelming internal or even external experiences. When we talk about it in psychology, dissociation can include things like feeling detached from your body, feeling unreal or foggy. We have time distortions, we have gaps in memory. The strangest one that happens with dissociation is watching yourself from the outside, almost like you're watching a movie of your life, and even feeling emotionally or physically far away from what's happening, which is why people kind of mistake it for emotional blunting. The thing is, emotional blunting can turn into dissociation at times if we think about it. And dissociation typically occurs when the brain perceives a situation as overwhelming and inescapable, or even threatening to identity, safety, or attachment. So that's when fight or flight won't work. And expressing the emotion isn't safe, so we just kind of disconnect and turn off. This isn't conscious avoidance, though. This is something that your body has learned to do. It's automatic. It's not something sometimes that you can stop, but you can become aware of. And it happens a lot with trauma. Your brain has dealt with a lot of unsafe situations. And so it says, hey, if I can't stop this, then I'm going to step away from it and not have to deal with it right now. But these two, emotional blunting and dissociation, are confused because of the overlap. And they're still, again, not the same. With emotional blunting, we have reduced emotional intensity. They're muted or distant, but there is still some steadiness and consistency in it. You're present in the situation, you're just dulled. So you feel something, not a lot of it, but something. With dissociation, there is a complete disruption in awareness, memory, and sense of self. And it may come and go suddenly. And this is, as much as emotional blunting may come from like depression and trauma, dissociation can be triggered by stress, reminders of the trauma, or even some threat to the system that they've determined is a threat. Again, you feel unreal or detached or even not here. When we talk about dissociation, there are times where it's not only like you're viewing your body from the outside, but sometimes you're not even, your surroundings are not even what you think they are. A client, not my client, but I've heard a story of a client where they were in session with their therapist and they dissociated because they were talking about something very traumatic, and they dissociated in their mind, their brain. They were at the beach. They weren't even in that office. So it is a serious thing that is happening because you are mentally elsewhere. The simple way of remembering it is emotional blunting is turning the volume down. Dissociation is completely leaving the room. And why dissociation can block crying is because crying requires emotional access, bodily awareness, and a sense of safety in the present moment. When you are dissociated, you're interrupting all three of those. So your system has learned that feeling deeply is dangerous, and dissociation can breaker that switch, cut off that access, and help you stay safe. And the thing is, dissociation exists on a spectrum. Dissociation doesn't always mean a disorder. Mild dissociation can kind of look like zoning out, daydreaming, not remembering where you were driving for a bit. But more intense dissociation can include depersonalization. Again, that's that detachment from yourself, derealization, the world feels unreal, even dissociated amnesia, where they forget who they are, what's going on. There's total blocks of their life that are disappearing. And many people move along the spectrum, depending on the stress, depending on their experience, and what's going on to their nervous system. And people who feel more intensely may dissociate more. People who feel emotionally intense feelings do dissociate because that intensity can overwhelm their regular capacity. If your system runs hot and you're highly sensitive, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have enough support or skills. It just, that's where your system's calibrated at. And that could lead to you dissociating more often. So, what is to keep in mind if you do find yourself dissociating? I want you to focus on grounding before emotional work. So, really bringing yourself into your body, noticing what's around you, feeling your feet on the floor, because grounding brings awareness to that present moment and brings you into your body. So, even thinking about temperature shifts, textured objects, slow rhythmic movements of your body, whatever that works with. And again, we want to work with your body first, not the story. Dissociation is state based, not logic based. So it's based on how you are feeling. When you take a more body oriented approach, more than like a storytelling kind of approach to what's going on with you, it's more often effective than that insight alone. This could be like using EMDR to kind of process trauma. Dissociation is something that we pay attention to in EMDR, but body-based ones, since the trauma is stored in the body, is one way to kind of handle this. And again, building safety slowly. When you are emotionally overwhelmed, you're going to dissociate. So building that safety in your body, being able to regulate and understand what's going on in your body can help with dissociation. This means more predictable routines, safe relationships, consent-based emotional exploration, and therapy that respects that pacing. If I do have a client in EMDR who does dissociate, we do take it extra slow just to make sure that they are in the moment and are able to process the best that they can. But again, if you are dealing with dissociation, make sure that you seek professional support. This means that you are maybe feeling like frequent time lost, identity confusion, intense detachment, dealing with a tough trauma history, or feeling like your life is being disrupted or impaired in some way. This is a strong signal that dissociation needs to be tied to someone who knows how to help you. But if emotional bluntness feels like nothingness and dissociation feels like disappearance, both are signs that your system has learned how to protect you when feeling unsafe. Again, the goal isn't to force yourself to feel. The goal is to feel safe, and then you can return to feeling whatever else you need to feel. But my favorite part of each episode is, what can we do to deal with some of this emotional numbing or shutdown? How can we help our system be able to function better? Number one, we need to stop forcing tears and start building that safety, because crying isn't a performance, it's a release response. So if we are unable to cry, it means that we probably don't feel safe. So instead of asking, why am I not crying? Ask yourself, what would help my body feel 5% safer right now? And that might be being alone, being with your, comfort or safe person. That might mean dimming the lighting or being in a dark room, to be honest. That might mean a blanket or finding something warm and cozy. That could be soothing music. That can be a slower pace. Whatever helps you feel safe, that's what you're going to look to. Because once you feel that safety, you can feel the other feelings. We want to use body first steps. This is number 2. Body first steps to thaw that shutdown. Shutdown, again, often responds better to gentle activation, not intense kind of release. So we're going to try slow walking, rocking, stretching, humming, all of these things that help our body kind of release that tension. We can even think of warmth, warm showers, heating pads, tea, because again, we're kind of signaling we're trying to come back to our body. We're coming online. We're ready to feel. We want to make ourselves comfortable. And number 3, we want to use that affect labeling when feelings are fuzzy. Even when it feels distant, try naming what's present. This is heaviness. This is numbness. This might be grief. This feels like disappointment. When we start trying to name the feelings and building that emotional axis, it helps break that pattern of not knowing the words, which plays a part in that emotional bluntness and emotional numbing. And number 4, if medication might be involved, again, consult those who would know. If you notice decreased joy, reduced sadness, feeling flat, or even say, I can't cry even when something big happens, then you're going to need to talk to somebody. And if you're on an antidepressant, consider bringing it up with your prescriber. Emotional blunting, again, is a commonly reported, should be discussed as part of a side effect monitoring system with your prescriber. But if you can't cry, it doesn't mean that you don't care. It doesn't mean that you're some emotionless zombie. It doesn't mean you're cold. It doesn't mean that you're doing things wrong. It often just means your system has learned that feeling fully is not safe. So it protected you and it turned down the volume. And so the goal isn't to pry yourself open. The goal is to build enough safety so that your emotions don't have to hide, so that they can flow freely. So this week, try one gentle practice. When you notice numbness or shutdown, place a hand on your chest and say, this is protection. I'm allowed to go slowly. And then do one small thawing step. Warmth, movement, breath, or connection. Because your feelings aren't gone. They're just waiting for safety. But that's it for today's episode. Thanks for hanging out with me yet again. If you found something helpful, let me know. If you found something inspiring, leave a review. And even if you just found validation, share it with someone else. Maybe they need that validation too. Do you need more support though? Because we have a ton of resources at arizainspire.com. We do have a feeling wheel that can help bring language to these feelings. In that document, we also have different journaling prompts to help you grow closer to what you may be feeling. We have self-guided courses and workbooks. We have emotional first aid in crisis moments that really focuses on bringing you back to your body and body regulation, like we talked about in this episode, which will help you grow and heal and show up for yourself in the ways that you need to. But don't forget to follow on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at Ariza Inspire Co. because I keep it more conversational. I keep it more relevant. Like January, we're talking about the idea of New Year's resolutions. We're talking about self-compassion, and even that seasonal depression stuff. So we keep it pretty relevant on the socials. So look out for it. And of course, we're going to give you updates on what's going on with next episodes. But until we meet again, my friend, I want you to take care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time. Can't wait for next week? Here's a sneak peek of the next episode on the Ariza Inspire Podcast. So the anxiety error, when your brain assigns too much weight to this prediction, is kind of a problem. Because the core idea that I want you to get from this episode is that anxiety often happens when your brain predicts threats strongly and treats that prediction as highly reliable. In predictive processing terms, it's not only the prediction, it's the confidence your brain assigns it to. And if your brain is super confident that this feared outcome is likely, or you won't be able to cope with what happens, your body mobilizes.